series is dedicated to a warrior who wore the uniform with pride, who showed up every day to serve, and whose life was taken not on a battlefield, but on a street corner doing the job she loved. Captain Allison Russo was a 61-year-old FDNY EMS captain with over 25 years of service. She was a responder to the 9/11 attacks. She mentored generations of medics, and on September 29th of 2022, she was murdered in broad daylight in uniform while on duty, walking to get lunch. There were no sirens, no lights, just evil, unprovoked. Captain Russo's death was not just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call for all of us in this job. EMTs, medics, firefighters, we wear the uniforms that were once a symbol of safety, and now they can make us targets. This series on Frontline Mindset is not about fear, it's not about paranoia, it's about the mindset of preparation, awareness, and most importantly, survival. We owe it to Captain Russo and to every responder who walks into an unknown situation to talk about what no one wants to talk about: personal protection, situational awareness, reading threats, self-defense, trusting your intuition, and being ready when ready matters most. We're going to unpack all of this, starting in episode 1. Not as warriors, not as wannabe cops, but as professionals who deserve to go home at the end of every shift. So to Captain Allison Russo, we honor your legacy by preparing the next generation to see the threat, trust the gut, and walk smart into every call. Let's get into it.
All right, everybody, it's Rob, Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio, and today I want to go over with everybody some things that have been going on recently that have kind of, just made me think. So let's get to the point. The other day, the murderer of EMS Captain Allison Russo from the FDNY was sentenced to 25 years to life. Captain Russo was brutally murdered in broad daylight, going to get her lunch by some maniac. And when I heard the verdict, I mean, no amount of justice can bring back Captain Russo, and it's just not, it'll never be enough. But it made me think that I want to kind of talk about personal protection for all of us as first responders, because violence against first responders is something that's been going on for some time. We're no longer immune to violence. Our uniforms are something that, attracts people who hate us, whatever. Like, we're the majority of the interactions that we have with the public, it's all about helping and caring. But there are times when even those who are trying to help can try to hurt us. And I wanted to kind of touch on this. I do a class on it, so I wanted to kind of talk about violence today in today's episode so we can understand it a little bit. Because I think if we don't understand violence, how can we, prepare for it if you don't have a good idea of what violence actually is, right? So the actual definition for our purposes of violence is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. So with that being said, there's a couple different types. There's actually 4 types of violence that we can see as first responders for what we're going to talk about today. The first one is unintentional violence, and this is violence that comes from compromised patients. They may be intoxicated, under the influence of drugs or alcohol. They could have a mental health diagnosis or an existing health condition, such as a diabetic incident, dementia, altered mental status or consciousness, fear, hypoxia, or a closed-head injury. Unintentional violence is something that happens when we have that diabetic patient who wakes up from that stupor and reaches for a handgun that he's got tucked underneath the pillow. Because they're having that adverse reaction to waking up. It could be the dementia patient who's a retired boxer, and you're going to transfer them from the nursing home bed to your stretcher, like what happened to me, and they deliver a really good jab with the right hand to your jaw, and they hit you right in the perfect spot. They don't quite knock you out, but they definitely stunt you. All right, and then like mental health patients who are experiencing some kind of acute mental health disorder could also, lead to unintentional violence. And then our traumatic patients, or somebody who's coming up out of an overdose, like they're unconscious and all of a sudden we're all standing over top of them. Or like I said, the trauma patients, or somebody that's hypoxic, they could all become violent. The thing about unintentional violence that I I don't want to say I like, but like that for us is good, is that typically unintentional violence is something that we can kind of figure out in our size up. We can look at patient history and see that. We can ask questions. We can know this about the patient from talking to bystanders, or as we're doing that treatment of the diabetic or somebody who's on an opiate and we're giving Narcan to, we can kind of take some precautions to clear the area and step back. Maybe even with, like, for, a patient who we're suspecting of using opiates, we can kind of check them for weapons quick before we start, as we're ventilating them, before we give them the nasal Narcan and stuff like that. So just a couple of things that, we can do. We still need to protect ourselves from unintentional violence, and it might be something that happens, but it's not intentional to us, but we're still in, it's not, or I should say it's not malicious, but we're still in danger. The next one is intentional violence, and this is premeditated and intended to cause harm, injury, or death to other individuals by patients and family bystanders. Intentional violence, like I said, it's premeditated, it's intended to cause harm. So if somebody's planning the ambush or planning the attack, this could be, something as simple as a mugger in the street, or it could be something, much more devious and just evil. One of the things about intentional violence is there's often grooming things that they're going to start doing, tightening up their clothing, adjusting a hat, looking, some pre-attack indicators, and we're going to go into them in another episode, but the pre-attack indicators often are with intentional violence. You can tell someone's about to do something. You'll get that intuition coming over you, the feeling of something's about to happen, and it's typically their body language is going to give it away. One thing about intentional violence that I like to tell everybody is that the eyes are the gateway to the soul, but the hands show the intentions. With intentional violence, especially if they're going to use a weapon, they'll be reaching for it. You'll notice a 45-degree angle form on their arm with their elbow as they go to reach for something, or as they go to cock back to swing. These are all things that are going to potentially, you'll be able to see as this unfolds. All right, social violence at its core, it's about human relationships. Competition and establishing dominance, or sorting out a pecking order, teaching somebody a lesson, also known as an educational beatdown, impressing women, or showing off in order to gain social status. Think of the monkey dance, like chimps and primates back in their day, beating their chest and then getting into an actual fight. One of the things about showing off in order to gain social status you need to be aware of is, like, family members and stuff like that, or friends of a patient can very quickly turn into a mob against you, the first responder, because of that social violence. Like, they could be slighted by you, or feel you slighted, or feel you haven't done something, and now there's a group of people who are turning against you. Think of bar fights, perceived slights, gang territory disputes, playground bullies. This is all social violence, and we can get caught in social violence just as a bystander. Like, we don't have to be involved with it. We can have two people who don't like each other, two gangs, whatever, criminals, and they can get into a ruckus, and we're right in the middle of it. So these are things to kind of keep in mind. And then the last one, and this is probably for me, some of the most, I'd say, scariest violence that's out there, because it's asocial violence or predatory violence. Murders, rapes, mass shootings, just all examples of some that are out there. One of the things that you need to know about asocial violence is the asocial violence person, they don't see you, they see through you. They're hell-bent on destruction. They'll often lack clues, and this can be a surprise or sneak attack. You need to think about asocial violence as a predator, and the predator has picked the moment to attack and will attack until destruction or complete destruction has occurred. One of the things about violence that I want you to also remember is this quote from Dr. William April. He unfortunately passed away, but he said, "To properly plan for violence, you must first admit and accept that the world is not as it ought to be." All right? That is huge. As we're out there, like, we go on calls every day, and 99.9% of the people that we respond to, we're there to help them, and that's good. However, at the same time, we need to be aware that there are people out there who are going to try and hurt us. Hopefully today, understanding violence has helped you recognize danger faster. Hopefully it can help you kind of figure out some responses, and we're going to talk about those in a future episode about de-escalation, disengagement, and then even defense if you have to defend yourself. In the next episode, I want to go into justification of force. And I know people will think to themselves, justification of force, that sounds like cop stuff. Well, if we have to defend ourselves, we're going to have to understand what a threat looks like, and we're going to have to understand justification of force. And I'm not a lawyer, nor do I claim to be, but like, we're going to get into some of the stuff on that, because if you use force against another person, you have to understand the use of force and how it's going to affect you and the individual, and what the rules of use of force are when somebody's trying to hurt you. I want you to keep yourself and your crew safer both on and off duty. So like I said, these are some of the things that are coming up. I just wanted to kind of touch base with you guys on these issues today because, you know, Captain Russo is a true hero. She was a 9/11 responder. She was a mentor to EMTs and paramedics, and she was killed in broad daylight, savagely stabbed to death by some maniac trying to get her lunch. So we will see you guys in the next episode. Please be safe. If you have any questions or comments about this, let me know. I want to hear them on the violence and what we've talked about today. This is Rob from Frontline Mindset. We'll talk to you later.
National Fire Radio.